Καλησπέρα σας και καλώς ήρθατε σε μία ενδιαφέρουσα, θέλω να πιστεύω, συζήτηση, η οποία κατά κάποιο τρόπο αγγίζει τις ελληνικές καρδιές με έναν ιδιαίτερο τρόπο, γιατί απευθύνεται ή μάλλον αναφέρεται σε ένα κοινό παρελθόν, το οποίο πάλι με έναν ιδιαίτερο τρόπο η Λάουρα Τσβιέρτνια και εγώ μοιραζόμαστε. Δίπλα μου, λοιπόν, έχω την πρωτοεμφανιζόμενη μυθιστοριογράφο, γιατί είναι και αρθρογράφος, είναι δημοσιογράφος η κοπέλα, Λάουρα Τσβιέρτνια, η οποία μόλις έχει εκδώσει από τις εκδόσεις LOGGIA το πρώτο της μυθιστόρημα στα ελληνικά, μεταφρασμένο, «Στον δρόμο μας φωνάζουν αλλιώς», που είναι μία μυθικοπλαστική, δηλαδή μία μυθιστορηματική, ας πούμε, πρόταση, με την οποία αφηγείται την ιστορία της οικογένειάς της. Η Λάουρα έχει την εξής διτή ταυτότητα. Είναι μισή Γερμανίδα και μισή Αρμένισσα. Από την αρμένικη μεριά της, ο Αρμένης πατέρας της και η γιαγιά της ήρθανε από την Ισταμπούλ, από την Τουρκία. Και ένα από τα πράγματα τα οποία με εξέπληξαν διαβάζοντας το βιβλίο είναι ότι η αρμένικη ταυτότητα στη Γερμανία σήμερα, και εδώ και πολλές δεκαετίες, αποσιωπάται, διότι αποτελεί μέρος, κατά κάποιο τρόπο, της τουρκικής ταυτότητας, με αποτέλεσμα άνθρωποι οι οποίοι δεν μπορούσαν να μιλήσουν για την αρμένικη γενοκτονία στην Τουρκία, να συνεχίζουν να μην μπορούν να μιλήσουν για την αρμένικη γενοκτονία στην Γερμανία. Κάτι το οποίο μας χωρίζει τη Λάουρα και εμένα, διότι εγώ είμαι μικρασιάτισσα και μπορώ φυσικά να μιλήσω έτσι για τις εθνοκαθάρσεις που συνέβησαν στους Έλληνες και στους ποντίους Έλληνες. Εγώ λέω τους Έλληνες τους Μικρασιάτες και τους Έλληνες ποντίους από τους Νεότουρκους. Ενώ η ιστορία της Λάουρα και της οικογένειάς της μας δείχνει ότι αυτό δεν είναι. Μιλάει με σιωπές. Οπότε θα ξεκινήσω, νομίζω, με αυτήν την ερώτηση. Λάουρα, καλώς ήρθες, καταρχάς.
Ja, das Interessante ist für mich tatsächlich auch eine Begegnung mit jemandem wie dir zum Beispiel, wo ich erfahre, wie einfach das auch sein kann, seine Identität auszudrücken. Und in Deutschland ist es ja aber so, dass wir viele Menschen haben, die aus der Türkei eingewandert sind als Gastarbeitende und die ihre Konflikte, ihre Vorurteile von zu Hause mitgebracht haben. Und die Menschen, die in der Türkei als Armenier schon diskriminiert worden sind, haben das mit nach Deutschland gebracht und haben diese Angst mitgebracht, für ihr Armeniersein Nachteile zu erfahren, gerade in der Fremde. Auch tatsächlich reale Angst, weil es auch in Deutschland rechtsradikale türkische Gruppen gibt. Und deswegen ist es nicht bei allen Armeniern so. Armenier, die aus Armenien eingewandert sind, haben erstaunlich oft weniger Probleme damit, aber die Armenier, die aus der Türkei eingewandert sind, die diese Völkermorderfahrung haben, die jahrzehntelange Diskriminierungserfahrung, die verstecken ganz häufig ihre Identität bis heute.
Είναι πολύ ενδιαφέρον αυτό. Ναι. You have to hold your microphone at about this, because then it does, it does something with the sound, and you're not heard very well to the translator, to the interpreter. Είναι πάρα πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα αυτή η διπλή αποσιώπηση, λοιπόν, που συμβαίνει στους Αρμένιδες της Γερμανίας. Και από ό,τι καταλαβαίνω, το δικό σου βιβλίο, Λάουρα, είναι το πρώτο, αν όχι το πρώτο, ένα από τα ελάχιστα βιβλία τα οποία παρουσιάζουν αυτή την ιστορία μέσα στη Γερμανία. Σωστά, δεν έχει υπάρξει δηλαδή κάποιο κίνημα reclaiming, να πάρετε πίσω αυτό που λέμε, την ιστορία σας ως Αρμένιδες μέσα στη Γερμανία.
Aber es ist ja nur der Vater, dem es damit gut geht. So? Like this?
Yes. Λίγο πιο κάτω.
Okay.
Here. There.
Ich lerne immer mehr hier in Griechenland dazu. Aber es ist ja nur der Vater, dem es damit besser geht, mit dieser Identität zu unterdrücken. Und ich würde auch sagen, ich glaube, es geht ihm gar nicht unbedingt besser damit. Aber der Vater hat halt in dem Roman hat wahnsinnige Angst davor, seine Identität zu leben. Und deswegen verschweigt er sie. Die Tochter wiederum, die nächste Generation, die 4. Generation, die leidet an dieser Lücke. Und da beginnt eben auch ihre Reise zu ihrer armenischen Identität.
Προφανώς το βιβλίο σου είναι ένα βήμα προς αυτή την κατανόηση, καταρχάς. Can you hear it? Πρέπει να αλλάξετε το κανάλι. Το ακούω εγώ, ενώ πρέπει να το... Ναι. Με ακούτε? Δεν σας ακούει η Λάουρα.
Ich glaube, es war gar nichts Neues, sondern sie haben das ja schon in Istanbul gemacht. Also sie haben schon in Istanbul ihre Namen verborgen. Sie haben ihre Namen dann in Deutschland weiterhin, also in dem Roman ist es ja so, deswegen heißt der Roman Auf der Straße heißen wir anders, weil, ich weiß nicht, ob Sie das wissen, aber weil in der Türkei gab es ja auch eine staatliche Politik, die den Leuten ihre Namen weggenommen hat, also ihre Nachnamen verändert hat, türkisiert hat. Und viele armenische Menschen, aber ich kann mir auch vorstellen, andere Minderheiten haben dann ihre Vornamen auch geändert. Zu Hause hießen sie dann, wie in dem Buch, Mariam und auf der Straße Meryem. Und das war einfach gängige Praxis. Und die haben sie mit nach Deutschland genommen und einfach weitergemacht. Und der Vater geht ja sogar so weit, dass in meinem Roman, dass er seiner Tochter nicht einmal einen armenischen Namen gibt, sondern er gibt ihr den deutschesten Namen, den er sich vorstellen kann, für die Menschen, die Deutschland kennen. Carlotta, eine Mischung aus Karl und Otto. Das ist für ihn so das absolut Beste, der deutscheste Name. Und weil er wirklich möchte, dass sie sich ganz und gar deutsch fühlt. Und es geht aber nach hinten los.
Θα ήθελα τώρα να βάλω αυτό που είπες, Λάουρα, στο πλαίσιο λίγο για το κοινό μας. Θέλω να φανταστείτε, παρακαλώ, το εξής. Ότι η οικογένειά της και η οικογένειά μου έχουν ζήσει παράλληλες ζωές. Η δική της φυσικά την γενοκτονία των Αρμενίων, η δικιά μου την εθνοκάθαρση των Μικρασιατών, η υπόλοιπη της οικογένεια, το πογκρόμ, τα Σεπτεμβριανά του 1955, εμείς μιλάμε για την ιστορία μας, γράφουμε βιβλία για αυτή, οι δικοί της δεν μιλάνε για την ιστορία της, δεν υπάρχουν βιβλία για αυτή στη χώρα της. Αυτό θέλω να καταλάβετε, αυτή τη διαφορά. Και με αφορμή αυτό θέλω να ρωτήσω τη Λάουρα, να πάμε στη δυτή σου ταυτότητα, Λάουρα. Είσαι μισή Γερμανίδα, μισή Αρμένισσα. Κατά κάποιο τρόπο, αυτή είναι μια προβοκατόρικη ερώτηση που θα σου κάνω, από τη μία μεριά είσαι η κληρονόμος μιας ιστορίας θητών, δυστυχώς, στην ιστορία της Γερμανίας. Και από την άλλη μεριά είσαι η κληρονόμος μιας ιστορίας θυμάτων. Θα ήθελα να μάθω πώς εσύ η ίδια συνδυάζεις και συγκεράζεις αυτές τις δύο σου ταυτότητες.
Ich glaube, das müsst ihr noch mal hören. Das habe ich jetzt nicht ganz verstanden. Also noch mal. Also ich weiß nicht, ob es an der Übersetzung lag, aber ich habe die Frage nicht ganz verstanden. Could you say it again, because it was I didn't get the question.
I'll try again in Greek, though, because it's right. Είσαι Γερμανίδα και είσαι Αρμένισσα. Από τη μία μεριά, η ιστορική σου ταυτότητα, κληρονομημένα, δυστυχώς στο παρελθόν της, έχει μία βαριά κληρονομιά από θύτες, δηλαδή από ανθρώπους οι οποίοι έκαναν κακό Γερμανοί στο παρελθόν, έτσι. Και από την άλλη μεριά, έχεις μία βαριά κληρονομιά από ανθρώπους που υπήρξαν θύματα. Και αναρωτιέμαι πώς συνδυάζεις αυτές τις δύο ταυτότητες, εσύ, του θύτη και του θύματος στο παρελθόν σου. Got it?
Ja, das ist tatsächlich richtig schwer. Also ich finde, also in Deutschland haben wir ja, ich hoffe, das ist jetzt die richtige Antwort auf die Frage, aber in Deutschland haben wir ja eine vielfältige Gesellschaft mit ganz unterschiedlichen Identitäten und die alle durch die Gastarbeitermigration geprägt sind und durch andere Migrationsströme. Und in Deutschland haben wir aber die Neigung, immer zu sagen, ist die Person jetzt deutsch? Ist das jetzt ihre deutsche Identität? Und es gibt aber kaum Offenheit, diese anderen Identitäten anzuerkennen. Deswegen hat man damit schon mal ein Problem. Also wie bin ich jetzt eigentlich deutsch, obwohl mein Vater aus der Türkei kommt? Und wie kann ich denn eigentlich aus der Türkei kommen, wenn mein Vater Armenier ist? Also es ist so ein komplizierter Wust, durch den muss man erstmal durchsteigen. Und dann aber auch noch daraus etwas zu machen, also auch literarisch zu erschaffen, fand ich gar nicht so einfach. Also deswegen brauchte ich, glaube ich, in meinem Roman diese verschiedenen Figuren, die alle ja auch für einen Teil dieser Identität stehen. Ich hoffe, das war die Antwort auf die Fragen.
Πώς έψαξες να βρεις τις πληροφορίες, λοιπόν? Τι έρευνα έκανες για αυτό το βιβλίο?
Also in meiner Familie ist es sehr schwer zu graben, weil in meiner Familie herrscht ein großes Schweigen. Also jetzt ist es besser geworden, seit das Buch erschienen ist. Aber vorher war es ganz, ganz schwer, Informationen zu der Geschichte meiner Familie zu bekommen. Auch zu dem Völkermord, aber auch einfach nur zu dem Trauma, das meine Großmutter, die als Gastarbeiterin gekommen ist, mitgebracht hat. Also ich weiß auch gar nicht, ob das hier alle so wissen. Ist das in Griechenland eigentlich so Thema, dass die Gastarbeiterinnen und Gastarbeiter in Istanbul, ich weiß nicht, ob es hier auch so war, die wurden ja einer Untersuchung unterzogen. Die mussten sich alle nackt ausziehen und wurden, bevor sie überhaupt nach Deutschland kommen durften, einmal von deutschen Ärzten untersucht und es wurde geguckt, ob sie überhaupt hierher kommen können. So, und das sind Themen, über die konnte ich in meiner Familie, ich konnte meine Oma sowas nicht fragen, das hat sie auch nicht erzählt. Das sind alles Dinge, die konnte ich gar nicht herausfinden. Natürlich hat sie trotzdem einige Sachen erzählt, also es ist ja nicht immer komplettes Schweigen. Aber da war natürlich dieser Teppich von kleinen Informationen. Und dann habe ich mich aber auf die Suche gemacht und sehr viel recherchiert. Also ich habe mit Armenierinnen und Armeniern gesprochen, ich habe mit Gastarbeiterinnen gesprochen, ganz verschiedener Herkunft, mit Forschenden, ich habe gelesen. Und das war für mich ganz oft sehr augenöffnend. Also zum Beispiel auch dieser Punkt mit den Untersuchungen. Das ist in Deutschland, das lernt man nicht in der Schule, wie mit den Menschen umgegangen wurde, die aus anderen Ländern zu uns gekommen sind. Ich habe irgendwann herausgefunden für einen Artikel in der Zeit, dass damals nicht nur Männer gekommen sind. In Deutschland hat man das Gefühl, es kommen nur Männer. Und ich dachte, warum ist meine Oma denn eigentlich gekommen? Die ist doch eine Frau, die ist ganz alleine gekommen. Und irgendwann habe ich selber recherchiert, dass es 700.000 Frauen waren, die damals gekommen sind. Und deshalb verdanke ich alles diesem Buch. Also ich habe ganz viel über meine eigene Identität gelernt, um meine fiktionalen Charaktere beschreiben zu können.
έλεγα. Θα ήθελα να μάθω, επίσης, πάνω στην έρευνά σου, γιατί πήγες η ίδια στο Γερεβάν, στην Αρμενία. Θα ήθελα να μάθω τι έκανες, πώς έψαξες, πώς μάζεψες πληροφορίες, πώς κατάφερες να κάνεις τον μπαμπά σου να μιλήσει.
Ja, stimmt, den Teil gibt es ja auch noch. Die Armenienreise, die die beiden in dem Buch machen. Ich bin vor dem Buch, bevor das Buch... Wieder falsch? Okay.
Δεν σας ακούω, δεν ξέρω, δεν... Ακούτε? Ωραία, Okay.
Okay, this is very interesting.
Okay. Try again, please, from the beginning.
Maybe you should give me... Ich bin, bevor das Buch überhaupt ein Thema war, bin ich mit meinem Vater nach Armenien gefahren. Also das ist, muss man vielleicht auch einmal sagen, das ist nicht meine exakte Geschichte, aber sie ist davon inspiriert. Und ich bin 2016 mit meinem Vater nach Armenien gefahren für einen Artikel in der Zeit, die Zeitung, für die ich arbeite, die Deutsche Zeitung. Und wir ich wollte dort mehr Informationen bekommen über meine armenische Identität. Und ich bin deswegen mit meinem Vater in ein Land gefahren, das irgendwas mit uns zu tun hat, aber wo nie jemand aus unserer Familie gelebt hat. Also das ist ja so komisch, dass es Armenien gibt, weil das ist irgendwie ein Land, in dem man Armenier ist, aber die verlorenen Gebiete, die gibt es ja nicht mehr. Da kann man ja gar nicht suchen. Also das, was vor dem Völkermord auch armenisches Siedlungsgebiet war. Und deswegen muss man, wenn man es suchen will, nach Armenien fahren. Und das war eine sehr spannende Reise, die ganz viel natürlich das Buch beeinflusst hat. Weil das zum Beispiel für meinen Vater war das fast ein Zusammenbruch, weil man in Armenien mit Koriander kocht. Also in Armenien tun sie in jedes Essen Koriander rein und in der türkisch-armenischen Küche nie. Und für meinen Vater war das so schlimm, dass das alles für ihn nach Seife geschmeckt hat, weil, ich weiß nicht, wenn man keinen Koriander mag, dann ist es ganz ekelhaft. Und das war eben, das war keine Recherche an sich, das war eine Reise zu uns, die natürlich aber ganz viele Gefühle beeinflusst hat, die später in das Buch eingeflossen sind. Ich bin aber danach nochmal nach Armenien gefahren und war im Völkermordmuseum und diese ganze Recherche habe ich auch gemacht. Ist better? With the mic? Yeah, me too.
Μιλώ προς την διερμηνία. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Θα το κάνουμε δυστυχώς στα αγγλικά, γιατί δεν μπορώ να συνεννοηθώ εύκολα μαζί της. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ και με συγχωρείτε για αυτό που θα συμβεί. We're going to do this in English. So let's take it off. Okay.
So I beg your pardon for my bad English right before.
It's not bad English. And what I can do, if you want me to do, is I can translate it into Greek directly afterwards. Is there anyone who doesn't speak English in this room? Wow, okay, cool. Okay, English it is. Ναι, υπάρχει... Εγώ ελληνικά και αγγλικά. Ναι, σωστό, έχετε δίκιο. Υπάρχει κανείς εδώ μέσα που δεν μιλάει αγγλικά? They all speak Greek, English. I'm so glad. Wonderful. Okay. Okay, that's cool. So, Laura, take your microphone. Let's talk about collective trauma, collective memory and collective trauma. Okay? Tell me your thoughts about it and how these thoughts were distilled into this book, please.
Yeah. We were talking about this before, so I thought it was such an interesting question to combine the collective trauma and the memory and to ask what it has to do with each other. Because for me, it's like the basic, the most important thing to think those things together. Because in the family I described in my book, there's a trauma since the genocide, transmitted from every generation to another generation, and not only in parentheses the things that happened during the genocide, but everything that came afterwards, like the poverty, like the discrimination, like the need to emigrate and everything. And so this family is suffering from the problem that they can never leave this trauma. Like in every generation, there's again this trauma and in a different way. Not the same way all the time, but in a different way. And so my point of view is that you need a collective memory to end this trauma, or just maybe hope to end this trauma. Because if you don't have a collective memory that says these things have happened to you and these things are things you are suffering from and your ancestors were suffering from, then the people can't speak about it. Because some scholar told me, some genocide scholar told me that if you don't have the acknowledgement of your trauma, then you cannot talk about it. You always have to defend yourself in front of everybody, and so you better stop to do it. And in the case of the Armenians, I talked to a scholar who interviewed a lot of Armenians who suffered the genocide, and he told me some of them were only able to speak about it when the lights were out, or some of them were only able to sing about it, like to sing a song that was transmitting the message what has happened to them, because of the horrible things that happened that are unspeakable, but also because they didn't have the room to talk about it. And I think the collective memory is a room for the victims and for their ancestors to speak about it.
I'm going to do a very, very brief summary of your book for those who have not read it. So, the story, this fictional story, which is based on her own and her family's circumstances, is very briefly this. The young Carla, for the first time during her Armenian grandmother's burial, she's confronted with her Armenian side, with her Armenian culture. And little by little, she's starting to feel out what that would have been like, because she has no knowledge and no comprehension of that, even though instinctively it runs through her. She lives in Bremen Nord, or whatever you pronounce it, in North Bremen, in Germany. And she has many friends. She's surrounded by many friends who are of Turkish origin, and therefore she cannot openly talk about her Armenian identity, because, they dismiss her. We never did these things to you. How can you say these things about us? They're not true. Why are you spreading lies? The father is not helping out either. But at some point, Carla says, enough is enough, when she's at university. Enough is enough. I'm going to Armenia. Let's go to Armenia and figure out what's going on. So they travel with the father to Armenia. And he lands in Armenia, and it's almost like he's going home, even though he's never lived there, because he's an Armenian from Istanbul. He was brought up in Istanbul, right? And then the rest you will have to read, but it's this negotiation between these mixed identities. That's the brief call of and of course, there are things that happen in the book that I'm not allowed to talk about. I don't want to give away anything, but there's also scenes in the book that moved me to tears, and that's why we talked about collective trauma and collective identity. There are scenes that, you know, instinctively or unconsciously reminded me or spoke to me of what my family has gone through, or any family that has been uprooted from their home. It doesn't have to be Greek, it doesn't have to be Armenian, any family whatsoever that has been uprooted from their homeland and from their home would have instinctive knowledge of that, right? And I would like you to tell us a brief note on how this we talked about this. This is not autofiction. This is fiction. This is not memoir. You have this. Laura does this interesting back and forth when it comes to time. She talks in the present, she talks in the past, in the near past, in the further past, and then again in the present, and even changes between these two from paragraph to paragraph. And so little by little, the story is intertwined and comes together. But in the end, we're not going to tell you what happens in the end, but in the end,
No.
many questions are left open so that the audience can decide. Why, Laura?
Yeah, for me, I discussed a lot with my publisher about how to write it, because I had this clear idea that at the end I followed it. And I'm still convinced that it's the best way for this story to be told, because, of course, you can tell a story like this. A woman has a problem with her identity, and then she convinces her father, and then they go to Armenia, and then they find a relative they never knew they had, and then she knows her story. And I didn't want that, because I wanted the people to feel how it is when memory is lost. When you will never find this memory again. It's lost, it's gone. You will never know what happened to your great-grandmother. You will never know, because this is what state denial does to people. It kills the memory. And so I said to my publisher, no, I don't want them to have a happy ending, and she knows everything. And it's not a bad ending. And and then she was like, yeah, but the reader has to know. And then I said, yeah, I will give the reader the information, but just not the narrator. And so therefore I put memory parts of the whole family, and it goes back like from her own memory back in the generations till the last generation where the trauma began. And this was, for me, it was so important just to let the reader feel how it is.
Tell me a bit more about the reception of the book in Germany. The good things, but also the bad things. The fear that you have been entertaining that something might happen to you because of this book.
Yeah. Actually, the bad things were before the publication, because I was really afraid. There was a time I was not afraid, I was just writing the book, and then there was the publication coming up, and then I was like, oh my God, will I get some horrible consequences? Will there be some right-wing Turkish organizations sending me mails that they want to kill me? And because they do this in Germany, it's happening. It's not, in Germany you can't do so easily a talk about the Armenian genocide. Now it's easier, but some years ago, when I was writing the book, there were a lot of horrible threats to people who did theater about it. And when there was an acknowledgement in 2016, one of the politicians who is Turkish descendancy, and he wanted to promote the acknowledgement of the genocide, and then he was even threatened by Erdogan and by German people, and he needed security and stuff. And so then I was like, oh my God, what did I do there? Would I be threatened? And I have a little kid, and oh my God. And then actually it didn't happen, and the book was read very often. I had over 70 readings, public readings. This is the beautiful thing, and maybe this now can change, because now it's converted into a school book. So by a very important publisher from Germany, the Reklam. I don't know if the German know. So this is like a very huge step for the book. They publish Goethe and stuff, and so maybe now it can change. It can happen that now, with going to the schools, because maybe before the cultural departments, they weren't so interested, or they had other topics. The last years were full of topics the right-wing Turkish people could focus on. But maybe with the schools it changed. But maybe not. Maybe I have written a book that might not cause that. I don't know. Somebody just once told me it's also a book that is opening a discourse. I cannot analyze myself. you should tell me. But I have had Turkish people in the audience, open-minded people, but they were sometimes telling me that they liked the book because it was for them a good way to focus on that topic. But I don't think that the right-wing group think about
maybe they don't read. I don't know.
Maybe they don't. I hope
but you did tell me that you do have people coming up to you saying thank you for writing this book.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving voice to this story that my family cannot talk about, right?
Yeah, this has happened to me a lot, and it was something that surprised me actually, because when I wrote the book, it was more a personal project. Maybe it sounds egoistic to you, but it was a little bit just I wanted to write that book, to get the story out of me, and also to write literature. And then afterwards, I was seeing what is happening with the book, and now it has happened a lot of times to me that I was reading in public, and afterwards there were coming people to me, and some of them were even crying and telling me, this is my story. My mother always told me never to say your name in public, never to say you are Armenian. And so this is still now moving me right now, because I have not before anticipated this power of the book.
And it's interesting that you say never say your name in public, because this is almost exactly the title of the book. In the street, they call us a different name, and it refers to how her ancestors changed their names. For example, from Armine to Mariam, and from Avi to Ali, so that they wouldn't be picked out when they lived in Istanbul, and later when they moved to Germany. They wouldn't be picked out as Armenians, so they changed their names, even though at home they would keep their own names, right? And it's still being done. That's what's interesting. But I want to end this conversation on a positive note. Okay, because there's always hope for the future. And so, Lara, you have studied Latin American studies, and you have seen ways of reconciliation between people who once used to murder each other. Here in Europe, I think the most prominent example is between the German and the French, right? Who used to be at odds with each other, murdering each other for many, many centuries, and within 2 generations, after World War I, after World War II as well, now Germany and France are together leading the European Union, so it can be done, right? What is your example from Latin America?
Yeah, just one word again to the French and German example, because this was what I was talking about when I was in Armenia, because then at this time there was the time when Nagorno-Karabakh was ethnically cleansed, and then there were people just saying, how can we ever come to peace with Azerbaijan? How can we ever forgive Turkey? And then I was just thinking about Germany and France, and this is a very powerful example because I was growing up with no problem at all with the French people. It's like, oh, I love France, it's so beautiful, and they have a more beautiful language than the Germans have, and stuff like that. And so I don't have any problem, any inherited problem anymore. And as you said before, in 2 generations, so this is very fast, and this gives me hope. And talking about Latin America, this was my university study. I learned when they do in some societies, for example, in Colombia, I was there when there were the peace talks with the FARC guerrilla, and as a journalist, I was covering these peace talks with Colombian government, and it's not like the example like this, you have to do it, but the most important thing was that the truth has to be stated. Like, you have to name it by its name. And then in this society, sometimes with recent conflicts, then they say, okay, maybe the perpetrator does not have to go to jail for 1,000 years, but he gets like a more easy judgment. But the truth has to be heard and has to be stated. And I thought this always very interesting, because sometimes in Latin America you have very separated societies. Like we have this in this historical, or still today in the societies of Europe. And I think that the truth is the key to every reconciliation, even if it's so difficult to find a truth that is accepted by everybody. But I think we should seek for it.
And then we do have the Latin American examples, and we do have the Germany and France examples. So hopefully, Ireland, we do have the Ireland example. Very true.
Excellent.
Northern Ireland, very true. Which, thank you for speaking up, because this actually brings me to the point where I'm going to ask our audience to see if they have any questions that would like to ask you. Is there anyone who would like to pose a question? Yes. You can say it neither in Greek or in English, and I will translate it.
Or in German.
Whatever you want. Or in German.
I
But then
can
you
translate.
have to translate it for me.
Μπορείτε να τη ρωτήσετε
Όχι, πρέπει να σας ακούνε όλοι.
δεν γίνεται να...
Όχι, πείτε μου. Άντε, εντάξει, ναι. Άντε, ακούω. Ναι.
Μπορείτε να ρωτήσετε αν ανακάλυψε γέροντας στην
Αρμενία.
Αρμενία ότι έκανε κάποια πράγματα εξαιτίας της αρμένικης ταυτότητάς της.
Που δεν το ήξερε. Okay, the question is very interesting, actually. Did you discover, when you visited Armenia, that you had unconsciously been doing Armenian things back home without knowing they were Armenian?
Oh. Yes. Actually, it was more like when I was going to Armenia the last time, this was for my book publication because it was translated to Armenian. And then I was meeting because I don't speak Armenian. So for the first time I was in contact with German-speaking Armenians. And then when we talked about how we are, then I sometimes said, okay, this is very similar. I can't tell you now an example, but I was feeling very close, even though it is a post-Sovietic society that is very different than how I grew up. So, but there are some certain things. And one thing that I didn't discover in Armenia, but what I was telling you about now, is my Armenian fear. I call it my Armenian fear, my fright. Because in my family, I came to notice that my father, for example, and my grandmother, every time when there's something dangerous, that's not even dangerous, they go crazy and they just tell you, like, don't put this knife in your eyes, or don't put your hair in the candle. It's like crazy. It's not a real danger, but they are so, I'm telling it funny, but it's something deep inside, a horrible fear for that their relatives happen something. And now I have 2 children, and I'm doing exactly the same. And so I'm like telling my daughter right now, just, it's my Armenian fear, just don't listen to me, because it comes up. I get so frightened for her to happen something that even if it's just like this, don't fall and die directly.
There are parts, very, very small parts of the book in which you have Armenian quotes. Mm-hmm. So some Armenian words must have been spoken at home as you were growing up. So do you feel like you want to learn that language? Do you feel like you will gain something by learning it?
Of course. It's so difficult, actually. But the thing is, my basic problem was always, because language, as we see now, language is so important for identity. And in my family, we spoke Turkish. I didn't speak Turkish, actually, because they didn't speak Turkish to me, because they didn't want me to be inherited this language. But of course, this is my family language. This is a language of heart. So when I was thinking, okay, which language will I learn? Turkish, my father wouldn't be happy about it. Armenian, nobody can speak to me really fluent Armenian. So I decided to learn Spanish. And this was my problem. And now I promised my Armenian publisher that I will, when I come back the next time, that I speak Armenian. So I have to hurry up now. No, it's difficult, but I learned that there's this Duolingo.
Oh, yes, Duolingo is really good.
But it doesn't have Armenian. But the Armenians
Okay.
built an own Duolingo for Armenians. So if you want to learn Armenian, you can search for the Armenian copy of Duolingo where you can learn it.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One final question, if there is. Is there a final? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for all this nice, interesting discussion. Actually, most of the Greeks, they have some background, on migration or refugees, so that's a very interesting discussion. I just noticed that, in Greek, the discussion says Χαμένες Πατρίδες, which means lost homeland, lost countries. And this is something which comes up in public discussion, also in Greece, in other places as well. So I was thinking about this utopia, that, migrant communities or children, second generation, they have this utopia in mind about all these nice places that we lost, the food, the flowers, the smell of these places, everything. And at the same time, of course, they keep the memory, they keep the family together, but at the same time, do you feel that, it's somehow difficult to, this keeps them behind, and doesn't help them so much to integrate? I mean, of course, for you and for kids, it's much easier, of course, it's many, many years after, it's generations after. I was thinking when you were talking also about the movies of Fatih Akin, I mean, I'm sure you know him. It's amazing movies, that they make a bit fun of all these, different identities, all these layers, the complications, along with Bousdoukos, this Greek-German actor. They have like really nice discussions with the history, with the historical memory. So all these, how do you see it? Because, I mean, the world is moving very fast the last years. And, we live in EU and things are changing so fast. And I don't know, do you still have this thing that we're staying a bit behind, we're keeping ourselves behind based on this memory, or is something that gives us some extra skills and extra potential?
I would answer two different ways. I'm sorry. The first is thinking about the Armenian lost lands. I think this is something that is different from the thing you are asking, because especially for the diaspora Armenians, I think it's still important for them to have the dream of someday maybe can go to Anatolia and visit the lost lands, what is not so easily possible, like with some memory science or something. I think this is a different thing. I think this is an aim we should hope for. But the migration aspect, like for example, what's also a huge part in my book, the guest workers' identity, I think I wouldn't say it's keeping the people behind. I would just say that I would hope for the German society to go one step further, for both sides actually, because in Germany we still tend, I was saying this before, but we still tend to think, is this person a German person? How many centuries ago was this person a German? And I think the migrants sometimes tend to do this as well, because of being excluded for such a long time from the identity, then they keep their own community identity. And I think we should just say, as I always say, everyone who lives in Germany and identifies as a German is German. And so if you have like very, very delicious burek, then it's very good to share it with everybody. And if you have, you know, like to feel the richness in the memories and in the background, and not something that keeps you away from society, from both sides.
One final comment on this, on the burek part, not so much. I'm going to do a little comment about the British and how they managed to integrate other peoples inside the United Kingdom. A few years ago, there was this huge voting in the United Kingdom about what is the United Kingdom's ethnic dish. Do you know what the answer was? Tikka masala curry. That's the national dish of the United Kingdom. So if you get to have the burek as the national dish of Germany, then you're there.
Actually, I have to, sorry. When I was living in Central America, I needed to cook something for my Nicaraguan family, and I wanted to cook them pasta, the Italian pasta, because we have so many Italian people, I could only cook this.
Pasta with burek, then?
Pasta with, okay, I would go for it.
Yes, okay. Yeah, okay. Λοιπόν, thank you so much for being here. I'm sorry about the upsetting thing with the sorry this, but thank you also to our interpreter, Laura. Thank you so much for being here. LOGGIA Editions, thank you for the support. Goethe Institute, thank you for the support. We hope to see you again. Go buy the book.